Hello and welcome to Galena LitFest. And tonight's program, Spice Spice Baby, Concocting Heat on the Page with Hollie Smurthwaite, our fifth LitFest event of 2026. Next week, we'll have our two final programs, the first being a virtual conversation with crime writer Laura Lippman and Tracy Clark, the second hybrid reading with Illinois Poet Laureate Mark Turcott. For more information on those, you can visit our website, galenalibrary.org. Just a quick note for everyone on Zoom, you are muted and you are unable to do yourself. So if you have any questions or comments, please put those in the chat window and we'll get to those by the end of the program. And tonight's workshop is being recorded and will be posted to the Galena Public Library YouTube channel within about a week from today. You can also find other archived workshops and presentations there, so feel free to subscribe. And I want to thank the Friends of the Galena Public Library for providing funding and support for our series of events that we do every year for LitFest. We wouldn't be able to do it without them. And I also thank all of you for attending tonight. We appreciate each and every one of you. So allow me to introduce Hollie Smurthwaite, who writes paranormal romance where magic meets reality, blending wit, angst, and steamy chemistry with themes of trust, empowerment, and found family. Known for her complete characters, humor, and dark moments, her stories make us laugh, cry, and sigh. She lives in Chicago with her husband, son, and a tragically small number of pets. So I'm going to turn it over to Hollie. Thanks, everyone, so much.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm so happy to be part of Galena LitFest 2026. I kind of had this planned, and then Larissa gave a really nice introduction. But as she mentioned, I am a paranormal romance writer. I've written a series of paranormal romantic suspense, started a series of paranormal rom-com, and wrote a short story that is monster romance / monster erotica. So I'm a lover of all things spice. And I hope at the end of today, you will have some tips and tricks and some appreciation of spice and also inspiration for adding some spice to your stories. So I think if you're feeling intimidated or awkward about trying to write sex scenes, it's important to remember that sex scenes are just scenes. They work like every other kind of scene. They need a beginning, a middle, and end. They need to have character development. They need to push the plot forward. They're following the same rules. When I say character consistency matters, what it's meant to actually be a comfort because your character is the same character. I think a lot of times we think like the sex scenes, all of a sudden your characters need to be, quote unquote romance heroes, but they're the same characters as they're doing any other activity in your book. And in fact, if you're writing a spicy scene, you might uncover something about your character that you didn't know about. And that's something that when you go back in revision, you can add those little details to your character and make them a little bit more three-dimensional and a little bit more interesting to yourself and to readers. And then I think it's important to remember that a sex scene, like every other scene, needs to belong in the story. It's a mistake to think like, I'm bored with my story, maybe I'll just drop a sex scene in there. That's how it comes out awkward, is if you put it in there without any kind of lead up or context. So if you want to avoid being, all you really need to do is have it make sense for the characters and for that place in the plot. And you can do that if you're like, no, I want a sex scene here. You just have to seed it a little in the scene before it. So what does spice mean? Well, there are no real rules. There's no guidelines, and different people have different interpretations. So I'm going to give you my definition, but keep in mind that you might read somewhere else and they're a little bit different, but they're going to be semi-close. So zero spice is zero spice. There's no physical contact, maybe hand holding. That's it. Like a 1 chili pepper, and it goes from 1 to 5, or I guess 0 to 5. So yeah, 1 chili pepper would be hand holding, maybe kissing. 2 chili peppers, you can have lots of kissing, well, probably not lots, but some kissing, cuddling, physical contact. There could be sex, but it happens off the page. That's what's called close the door, right? They close the door and then we know what happens, but we don't know what happens. And then when you get to the 3 chili peppers, 3 and 4 and 5, this is when you have spice or steamy or sex on the page. 3 chili peppers is usually there's sex on the page, but it's usually the scenes are not as long, they're not as graphic as your 4 chili pepper scenes, which is where things are going to be in graphic detail. They're steamy. They're usually extended scenes. There's often multiple scenes. And then your 5 chili peppers, which has all the content of all the rest of the chili peppers. And then the 5th one, usually for me, it requires something in like the BDSM intensity arena in order for me to call it 5 chili peppers. And this has changed as society changes and as what we write changes. At one point, probably in the 80s or 90s, if there was anal sex, it was 5 chili peppers. But now that is not the case. So how do we rate it? All right. First thing you have to do is you have to be in the right frame of mind, especially if you feel intimidated or awkward. The best thing you can do is to read spicy stuff. I liken it to if you go to the beach and you come outside the first 10 minutes, you're in your bathing suit in public. It's like very self-conscious and it's very awkward. But after a while, everyone on the beach is in bathing suits and you become acclimated to it. And then it's not weird. And then it just becomes normal. And I think you can take that kind of concept with spice. If you're reading spicy stuff, super spicy stuff, mellowy, spicy stuff, you start to become acclimated to it. And the more you read it, the more you'll kind of get the rhythms. It's like if you read in a genre, if you read deep into a genre, after a while, you start to know what the kind of tropes are and how the sort of character dynamics go. Same thing with spice. Like the more that you read in it, the more comfortable you're going to be. And it's not a hard homework assignment. The other thing is to remember that it's fiction and not real. So sex scenes are, especially in romance, you can have a lot of fun with it. You don't have to think like, okay, can he hold her up against a wall for 20 minutes? Because he can, right? It's fiction. He can. You know, you can have sex in the shower, nobody slips, nobody falls, nobody breaks a leg. That's like, it can be fun. It does have to still be physically possible. So I read a book recently where the female character's on her stomach on the bed in one paragraph. The next paragraph, she has her legs over his shoulders. Well, that's not physically possible, which is just an error on the author's side. But in that you have to kind of, unless you're doing somebody who's a contortionist or an alien, then maybe you can do some stuff. But it has to be in the realm of possibility, but it does not have to be in the realm of probability. And then you have to write like nobody is watching. So if you're doing your first draft and you're thinking about your mom reading it, it's going to be weird and awkward, and it's going to be very hard to write. And you have to remember that you're writing, no one needs to see it. No one needs to know you're even writing it. You can just kind of keep it to yourself and let yourself have fun and let yourself go a little wild. And then if you're done and you're like, I still don't think I want my mom to read it, then you write under a pen name. And no one ever needs to know that you wrote it. But if you think, I think if you write anything and you have some kind of someone's going to judge this in your mind, you're cutting down your creativity. So let yourself get a little crazy. All right, step 2, you have to know your writer why. Why, as an author, you're putting this spicy scene in the book. And it's sometimes writers will only put it in for the titillation, right? They want the reader to have this immersive experience, and that's why they put it in. But spice can do a lot more than just that. So it's an excellent, fantastic, amazing way to show vulnerability and chemistry between your characters. The chemistry is kind of obvious, right? They're attracted to each other and everything they do feels good, right? They have chemistry. It's a great way to show it on the page, and it's very fun. But it's also a great time to show the vulnerability, because when 2 people or more have sex, it's a great time to take a character who's very closed off or guarded. And then in this feeling of safety and connection, you can have a little ripple of vulnerability. Or it's a great time to share like a traumatic story, especially if the more open character shares something vulnerable, and then the other one will share it back. And then you have not just chemistry and not just like sexy fun times, but you have like a deeper connection. And a steamy scene can do that in a way a closed door scene cannot. It's a great way to show character change and the character arc. Whether it's awkward in the first scene and then much more open and fun in the next scene, or if they cannot get together in the beginning because of some sort of problem connecting, and then you show the growth that they can connect on a greater level towards the end. It's a very quick and easy way to show the difference or the progression of how the relationship is going via spicier scenes. And it is an amazing tool for deepening connection or fracturing connection between characters. So usually in a romance, the sex is between two main characters, it's going to be good. Almost all the time it's going to be good. And if it's not good, then it's at least sweet, right? And then once it's over, you can either have the relationship go forward because they're connected on a new level and they're going forward. Or once it's over, one of the characters says or does something really stupid. It could be because they've been open and now they're feeling exposed and they lash out or close down, and they can say something and do something that takes the relationship actually a step back. So you can do either one of those things with your scene, which is actually pretty cool. So you have to know, okay, so as a writer, this is why the scene is in there. But you also have to know from a character perspective why this scene is taking place. Each character has to want something, right? This is like a standard tenet of writing. But a lot of times I think we might just sort of say like, oh, well, they like each other, they're going to have sex. But it could be deeper or different than that. People have sex for a billion different reasons, and you might find something more interesting than that. It could be someone's bored. It could be someone's been traumatized and they want to feel something other than their sadness, right? Or it could be they're enemies to lovers and they have this connection and they hate each other, but they're like, you know what? Let's bang it out. And then we never have to see each other again, which is a great trope because as a reader, you're like, that's never going to work. But we like that, right? There's all these different reasons. And if you pick, and they don't have to have the same reason, right? One character might be coming at it from one direction, another character from another. And that difference of perspective can also make interesting writing. And then you have to decide who has the power, who's going to be sort of running the show during most of the scene. And it can switch, right? It can go back and forth, back and forth. It could be a battle, or it could just be a friendly back and forth. You might have one scene where one character is kind of in charge and another scene where another one is in, or maybe one where one's always in charge, right? They have that dynamic that works. But you kind of want to come in ahead of time. You want to think about it, like who's going to be the driver of the action? And then when in the story is this going to take place? You can have a sex scene take place on page 1. You're still going to have to do all the stuff that leads up to it. Afterwards, you kind of have to like go back in time a little bit, and so that it makes sense, you have to give some context. But you can have it whenever you want, but you want to make it sort of a conscious decision. And if you're writing something on the higher end of the spice scale and you want to have it kind of be a slow burn, so they don't have sex until towards the end, you have to seed that, because you can't, well, you can, but it's not a good idea to write something that feels like, say, cozy, right? Cozy and everybody's pleasant. And then at 75%, they're in, character A's sex dungeon. Your reader's going to go like, whoa, I did not see that coming. So you have to have little moments of arousal, and they don't have to be together. I mean, there's masturbation, there's fantasies, there's dreams, there's like little connections. Like you can have one character brushing another character's shoulder, but it causes physical reactions of arousal. You just want to sort of prep your reader. You have to teach them this is how the book's going to go, so that when the spicy scene shows up, they're not shocked by it. I mean, you might find a writer who's pleasantly shocked by it, but you could also like really alienate someone that's not the story they were looking for. And then where, and I put where in here because I think particularly if you're intimidated or feeling awkward about writing a sex scene, if you put it in a non-traditional location, by which I mean like not a bedroom, you can kind of up your spice a little bit without doing anything else. And that might be like when I was thinking of ideas, I was like, oh, like a forest preserve, right? Where nobody's there. Or, and then all my stuff was exhibitions or on a balcony. And I was like, all right, well, there's got to be some, even if it's like it starts in the lobby, it moves to the elevator, it goes up to the hall, it goes up to the back of the door, and then into the condo or apartment or house. Or if it's even in the kitchen or the living room, someplace that's a little bit different. And one of the other reasons is if you're going to have more than one sex scene, you're not going to want it to take place necessarily in the same place, because then you run into the problem of how do I make this sex scene 2 different from sex scene 1? Because if you use all your bells and whistles on sex scene 1, then you're like, uh-oh, what do I do now? And one of the ways you can up it is make it in an interesting location. So, okay, but how? How do you write the sex scene? Well, first you have to decide whose point of view it's going to be in. If you're writing a single point of view, then you're done. But a lot of times in romance, it goes back and forth, right? There's a male and female, or male. There's like the main characters each have a perspective, in which case you're like, okay, do I want it from the perspective of the person who's doing most of the giving or most of the receiving? Do I want to do it from the character I feel most connected to or the one that I'm struggling with? And there's no right answer, right? You can do whatever you want. You could also write it from both the perspectives and then decide what you like. And it can go back and forth. In my work, I usually, all my books except one, and the short story were dual point of view. And I would do both in every sex scene. Usually the female character has a lot more than the male character, but there's no right or wrong. But if you're like, I don't know what to do, it's better to make a conscious choice. Well, actually, that's not what I do. But if you're a discovery writer, just write what you feel like and then fix it later. And then my tip, and this is, I think, that is a wonderful thing about being a writer, is that you are a god. You can do whatever you want when you write a book. And one of the greatest powers we have is that we control time. If I want to write a scene and I want the male character to have his shirt off, I can write, he took his shirt off, and his shirt is off. Or I can have him undo a cufflink. I can have him unbutton the top button. I can make it a paragraph. I can make it a page. I could make it a chapter. It would probably be a boring chapter, but I could do it. Like, you can do whatever you want. And where you linger and where you slow down is where the reader is going to linger. So if you have like a moment that you really want to highlight, you're going to want to expand time and slow it down. You could take, it's a way that we're superior than movies. Because in a movie, if you've ever watched an action scene and the two characters are trying to have a moment while the guys with guns are coming down, and you watch it, and you're not watching the moment, you're going, what are you doing? Run, run. But when you write a story, you have that all in a blink of an eye. You can have a page that's a blink of an eye. And you can make something very powerful without running into that, what are you doing? And so keep that in mind when you're writing. Right, but seriously, how do you write it? So all sex scenes are actions, reactions, and interiority. It's pretty much it. There's somebody who's doing something, and the reaction is 2 parts. So if, for example, I'm the character that's like touching another character, so I'm doing this action, I'm feeling what I'm touching, and I'm also noticing this other person's reaction. So it's my reaction and their reaction as well. And the interiority is, what do I think about what's happening? What am I interpreting? And those fall into 3 different buckets: the head bucket, the heart bucket, and the gut bucket. So the heart or the head bucket is what the character's thinking. It's like an analytical, this is what happens. This is if you wrote a story like, I touched his shoulder, he went on one knee. This is all just sort of a head. These are the things that are happening. And then the heart moments are the feels. So this is like, I'm feeling embarrassed. I'm feeling aroused. I'm feeling tentative. I'm feeling angry. These are feeling moments. And then the gut moments are your more visceral, steamy moments. These are hungers and longings, baser instincts. And you want to have all 3 in your scene, but you can have them in any sort of, any kind of proportion that you want. So, and you want this to sort of match what you're already writing. So if you're writing like a gritty noir thing, you wouldn't jump into your sex scene, and all of a sudden there's a whipping wind and hair and everybody's lovely. Like, it doesn't fit, right? Or if you're like writing a character who's always thinking, and then they get into this sex scene and they're not thinking anymore, you could do that. But then when it's over, you have to go, she has to start thinking again. She has to be like, oh my God, I wasn't thinking that whole time. That could be a thing, but you want to do it on purpose. Because if you have a character who's always one thing and then you go in this other scene and it's different, that will make it awkward or weird. The reader will go like, that didn't feel right. But you want to have a little bit of everything in order to make sure that the experience is as three-dimensional as you can make it. And the steamier it gets, the more gut stuff you're going to want. Those are the reactions of swooping and tingling and zinging and all that other stuff. The spicier it is, the more that's got to be present. And it's very important that for specificity and detail, the more specific and detailed it is, the spicier it is, as a general rule. It's the difference between, he pressed his hardness into her softness. Well, that could be a hug. That could be sex. You would know in the context, you could use that, but it's lower on the spice scale, as opposed to, she grabbed his shaft and it was velvet over steel. You're like, okay, that was detailed. That's higher on the steamy scale. If you go even further and you're like, oh, there was a meaty mushroom head and the shaft had a vein up the side and it's hot and throbbing and weeping, right? Way, way farther on the spice scale. So if you want to sort of up your spice a little bit, you could probably do it just by being more detailed and not having to do anything else. If you just want to get your toe, if you want to dip your toe into it, if you're like, okay, but what do they do? What do they do? You could do the 4 bases, which is like a middle school thing, I think. First base is kissing, and the second base is touching over the clothes, and third base is touching under the clothes, and then fourth base is, your home run, your penetrative sex. Jamie Gold has a list of the 12 stages of intimacy. I don't think she invented this, but there's a handout, and there'll be a link for that. And in those, it was kind of like eye to eye. It's really weird. It's like hand to shoulder. There's like 12 of these, like hand to genital, like all these things. And you can look at that list. And again, when you're trying to think like, what can I do? You can remember, like, you also don't have to go in order. Like, you don't have to go kissing, then touching over the clothes, and touching under the clothes. You could start with penetrative sex, move to kissing, move to kiss or to touching over the clothes, and never get to touching under the clothes. You can do any combination you want. And this is, again, a way to make things different. If you're writing, especially more than one scene, or if you're like, I don't know what to do next, you can make up the list. You can close your eyes, swirl your finger, hit on something, and go like, I'm going to make this random thing work. And I think having that sort of like, I'm surprised by that too, might help surprise your reader, and it might make it more fun and interesting to write. You can remember that there's hands, mouths, I didn't put this, but body parts, other body parts, toys, objects around the room. Someone can be spanked by a TV remote. There's lots of stuff in the kitchen. You can use the environment to do interesting and different things if you want. And you want to be sure you use all the senses. I think I wouldn't worry so much about visual, because we all sort of get that immediately. But think about sounds, think about tastes, think about smells. And look on a page, you can do this in revision. Every page, put at least one different or interesting sensory thing on each page. And I have in the handout, there's a list of different kinds of touch, because it's kind of interesting. A lot of times we think, there's like gripping and grabbing. Sometimes we forget there's like temperature differences can be very interesting. And there is on the list, it's very interesting. There's different kinds of pain. And you'll find that you can take all those kinds of pain and turn them into different kinds of pleasure. So there can be a sharp pleasure. There can be a burning pleasure. There can be a throbbing pleasure. There can be a dull pleasure. And you can use all those things. Again, the spicier you go, the longer the sex scene is going to be, the more you're going to struggle to come up with things that aren't repeating yourself. I think sometimes, like, I'll be reading one of my own scenes and I'm like, everything's going great. And then I'm like, oh, there was another tingle. It can't have another tingle. I'll put a zing. Oh, I already have a zing. And you'll have to go through and figure out how you can make it a little bit different. And sometimes the solution is to cut one of the lines. I've done that before myself. But take a look at the handout and the different kinds of touch and see what that might pop in your mind, if something interesting might happen. I think when we find something interesting that we weren't expecting, it makes writing so much more pleasurable and so much easier. You're like, oh, this will be great, which is what we want. So tips, my first tips will also make your writing very fun, I think. And it's expectations and irony. So I think it's interesting to have a character come into a scene with a certain expectation or expectations. And that could be for, I'm going to use a female perspective, like herself or her partner or the situation. For example, if you have a character that's very clumsy and she comes in the scene and she's like, oh, I really want to have sex, but I'm going to be terrible at this because I don't know what I'm doing. It's going to go one of two ways, right? She's either going to be right or she's going to be wrong. So say that she's right. She is clumsy. She is awkward. The irony is he loves that. He finds that charming. He's used to dating slick, fake women, and she feels so authentic that even though she's kind of bumbling, it's endearing. And that's a surprise for her and a surprise for the reader, and it's really fun to write. Or she comes in there expecting to be clumsy, and then she's not, because she's not thinking about herself. She's thinking about him and their connection, and it makes her forget to be awkward, and things work out really well. And that is also fun to write. So it's a kind of thing, and you can do that from both perspectives. Or the situation, she thinks, you'll see that in all different kinds of scenes. It's really, in comedies, it happens all the time. It's like, oh, we're just going to have a quiet dinner with a couple of people over, and then it will cut, and there's like 50 people in the house, and they're having a huge party. That's an irony, right? The character thinks it's going to be one thing, and it turns out completely different. And so that's funny or interesting. Tension and rhythm. Every scene needs some kind of conflict or tension, which doesn't mean that the characters in their sex scene need to argue the whole time. They can, and that can be fun and interesting and sexy. But the tension can come from many different places. So it can come between like a character and themselves, right? If they want something, they want to touch, they want to be touched, but they don't know how to do it, or they're being denied by the other person. All that stuff is tension. So the tension also doesn't have to be negative, right? It can be one character is like, I want to touch you. And the other character is like, well, you're not going to touch me today. Today is all about you. And that's a different kind of tension. The rhythm. So think about, your scene does not have to be the same sort of tone or rhythm the whole time. So you might start where things are very frenetic, right? They're slamming up against walls. They're pulling each other's hair. And then sometimes you can have it changed for no reason, or you could put in an interruption. Somebody calls, somebody walks in the room, somebody knocks on the door, everything has to stop, right? And then you have a choice to make, right? So it's interesting if it's frenetic, stop. And the minute they go, they're right back where they were, frenetic, right? There's a satisfaction to that. Or you can use that opportunity to make it completely different. Frenetic, break. And then suddenly it's more soulful, it's deeper, it's slower. And that kind of shakes up the rhythm. So if you're feeling like this is feeling like the same all through it, you can change. Either someone can say something, is that all you've got? Whoa, now suddenly things are going to get more intense. Then maybe there's some hair pulling or pushing or whatever. You can change the rhythm and the tension in the story to make it more interesting. Foreplay. So foreplay, you need at least a little bit, even if I think in the lower your chili pepper, so in the 3 chili pepper range, foreplay is usually highlighted. It's not so much on the actual action of when they're having sex, but it's the brushing of fingers, it's the looking across the room, it's the constant awareness of where that other person is in the room. And that creates some nice tension, and it starts to seed when they have sex. You're like, oh, they're going to have sex now, because the tension is between them is just going to explode, which is great. That's what we want. But you can also just you could have sex on page 1, but then the foreplay comes afterwards. So then there's still touches afterward, or it pulls into the next scene. They have it and they think they're done, but then when they see each other again, it's still there. It's still working. It's still pushing them along. And then I like to find something unique for one character to either discover about themselves or discover about somebody else that will make it seem less cliched, and it will make the character more three-dimensional. I was just listening today to Most Eligible Billionaire, Annika Martin. And the one character is like a scrappy woman and then like a billionaire. And her thing with him is she notices almost in the first scene that he's got this like chunky watch. He's got a nice watch. And then she notices that. And then he takes his watch for some reason. And she's like, wow, he really did that well. It was like competency porn. And then she's obsessed with his wrist and it's not like a built chest or, big arms or a tight butt or something that you would normally see. It's something that you don't see very often. And it adds this extra dimension and it makes it feel more real. It makes it feel more specific and it's interesting. And then I have to say just a little bit about language, which is like the deeper you go into the Chili Peppers, the more you're going to have to use profanity. Like, I don't know that I've ever read like a 4 or 5 Chili Pepper story where the characters weren't swearing. And also, again, the longer your scene is, if there's certain words you're like, I don't want to say dick, I don't want to say it. Well, when you're moving that body part around in your story, you're like, okay, well, there's only so many other words I can use. And if you're writing something super spicy, and I would hope never, you don't want to use words like penis. Like, that is the least sexy word ever. You're like, no. In fact, I read one of my favorite books. Like, every time the sex scene comes, I start to cringe, and I love this book, but I hate the sex scene because there are 2 penises, not 2, like not as in the number 2, but she uses penis twice. And every time I'm like, ooh, don't do that. Don't do that. Again, it's your work. You can do whatever you want. But again, and you can't use, if you're like, I don't want to use dick, I'm going to use like danger stick, right? then that's gonna be weird, right? Your reader's gonna go like, what? That will get you on one of those lists of like bad, things. You don't want to like I don't know about breasts, I'm gonna use fun bags, stuff like that. And then you start to get weird. But the most profane body part terms, those they'll never steer you wrong in a 4 and 5 Chili Pepper story. So you can, if there's words you hate, you don't have to use them, but you make it harder to write if you're limiting your vocabulary in an extended scene where you're going to need something the whole time. And then figurative language. So all scenes can benefit from figurative language, but I think sex scenes, because we're dealing with really big emotions and big feelings, figurative language serves very well. If you're saying like that felt really good, like that doesn't mean anything to the reader. And you don't want to go too far on the figurative language. You don't want it to turn purple prosy where it's all these lyrical sentences, especially again, if you're writing something grittier or down to earth, and then all of a sudden it's all flowery, it's going to be awkward. But I think you can describe things really well using figurative language in a way that will give the reader a visceral response. I like to use the example of natural disasters. So you're like, okay, when I do figurative language, I'm going to pull from natural disasters. It works really well for sex scenes or any kind of intense scene. So if you take like a tsunami. So the tsunami is, right, the ocean's like pulling back. Then it builds into this great big wall and comes crashing down. It's a great metaphor for a great orgasm, right? It's much better than even like waves of pleasure. You're like, well, this wasn't a wave, this was a tsunami. And if you think like earthquake, right? Earthquake is when you're standing on the earth, which is what, if you say someone's earthy, it means they're very solid and stable. Well, then in an earthquake, what you think is stable is now suddenly shaking and it's cracking and things are like falling off the shelves and you don't know what's going on. These are like evoke big feelings. And I think if the further you go down the list of natural disasters or any kind of bucket that you're working from, the more interesting things you're going to find. So if you challenge yourself, you can go, okay, what could I come up with using mudslide or avalanche or tornado? And you might spend some time, if you're just like nothing, spend some time. Maybe you'll find something really interesting and unique. And it will be the kind of thing, if you find it, every time you read that passage, you'll go, oh, that's so good. And that's kind of what you want when you read your stuff. You want to find something that you're like, oh, that's so good. Even when I was thinking about this, I was like, what would you do with drought? And I was like, well, you wouldn't use drought to describe pleasure, but drought would be great to describe a more heart moment. If you have someone whose emotional landscape, right, is dried out and cracked and dying, and it just needs a little bit of water, that's all it needs. And then your other character can provide that water. That it gives you like, it can hit you in the feels, right? Yeah. So, oh, and you can take what you've already written, because you've probably already written a metaphor or a simile or some kind of figurative language, and you can find what you're already using and say like, okay, like say you're like you're using flower images, like somebody's like bloomed, there's a situation that was thorny, right? And you're like, oh, what else could I do with flowers, right? You could say, well, dandelions can grow anywhere, like that might be something. You know, orchids, very hard to grow, very finicky. In terms of sex, I don't know if you want to be a peony or whatever, but you might dig deep and find something. You might like, okay, flowers aren't enough. I'm going to go with foliage. I'm going to go, you know, with landscape. You can play around, see what you're already using, and then see what you can find that's interesting and different, and then expand from there. And then I have a couple of quotes, and these sort of exemplify what I've been talking about. So the first one is from Emily Henry, Book of Lovers. Emily Henry is the queen of figurative language. If you're like, I don't know how to find a good metaphor or simile, read any Emily Henry book. And well, it might make you feel like you can never write again because she's so good, but she's very inspirational. A feeling like a scorching hot slinky drops through me. Like, I don't know how she came up with that, but for me, when I read it, I can picture it in my mind. I can picture the slinky, and I picture it coming down, and I picture it hot, and it makes something visceral inside me. The next quote is Jeannie N. Frost from Halfway to the Grave. Everything seemed to spin and lose shape except bones. That far-off roaring was back in my ears, but it was my heart pounding that made the sound. The nerve endings in my loins shredded with anticipation. They lashed and wound together, clenching and unclenching with greater fierceness, waiting for the moment when they would snap. Now, I haven't talked about like kick-ass verbs, but there's some kick-ass verbs in here. I think loins shredded, that's an interesting pairing that I haven't seen before. And if you put just a little something of this, like heart pounding is a cliche. And good luck getting around that when you're describing sex scenes. Good luck getting around panting, and good luck getting around heart pounding. But she makes it interesting and different by pairing it with a sound, right? Far off roaring. And so the heart pounding makes a sound. That makes it interesting. And then she's got some great verbs. And then the last one, this is from Kate Quinn's The Huntress. This is not a romance novel. It's a brilliant novel. It's, I think, I would call it historical suspense or historical thriller. But this scene is amazing. I know how to fight, you red menace. Ian hurled the razor across the cabin and kissed her again, drinking down her bone-buckling taste of ice and Arctic wind, blood and sweetness. Her nails raked his back, and he sank into her like he was sinking into a headwind, blown and tossed and dizzied by chaos. I mean, that's amazing, right? Bone buckling. Every time I hear that, I was like, oh, I wish I had thought of that. But her combination of tastes of ice, Arctic wind, blood, and sweetness, that does not conjure a taste in your mouth when you read that, but it conjures a feeling. And that's actually what your goal is. You want your reader to feel something. You want them to be connected in. And she could have stopped at her nails raked his back, but she added, like, he sank into her, and she added the simile, right? Like sinking into a headwind, blown and tossed and dizzied by chaos. Again, it evokes like a feeling of being disoriented, and it really draws the reader through me into the scene. So those are the kinds of things that we can all do, right? If we try, we can all do these things. And now we're going to talk about spicing up the spice. And that's if you want to add BDSM elements into your story. And you don't have to go full core. BDSM has like a range, yeah. So you can take somebody who's dominating and someone who's submissive. In its essence, it's someone's bossy and another person likes the bossiness, right? That is not BDSM as you would think about it, but you can take sort of that flavor and add it to your stories. Bondage, like it could be handcuffs, could be manacles way at the one end, but on the other end, it could be hands holding wrists, over the head, or grab onto that headboard, don't let go. There's no actual bondage involved, but it has the flavor of that. Sensory limitations, that's blindfolding, noise canceling headphones, that sort of thing. The blocking off of one or two senses, in theory, in your book, will heighten all the other senses. Edging, which is very big right now, which is one character bringing the other character to the brink of orgasm and then denying them. They do it over and over again until they're crying every time, begging every time, and this close to a nervous breakdown. And then they're allowed to have their orgasm, and it's the best they've ever had. Discipline. So this could be, normally I think we think of spanking. It can go all the way to, whipping, caning, that sort of stuff. But it could also be, it doesn't necessarily even have to be physical. It could be the denial, like you're not allowed to touch yourself for the next day because you were bad. That is a form of discipline. BDSM relationship dynamics. And that could be like a master-slave thing, which again, bossy, likes to be bossed. Or there's a relationship called like baby girl and daddy, which is one character like caretakes the other. Yeah, I see your look. I feel like that too. But you can do it in if you do, and again, if these dynamics you're like, I don't like that, then you don't have to put it in there. And you don't have to call it that. You don't have to have the character call the other character daddy to have like a daddy baby girl dynamic. In fact, you'll see it in books. Now that I've said it, you'll see it all the time. It's when a character, a lot of times it's an overbearing male character who's going to caretake for a struggling female character. And then there's also the brat and the brat tamer. And when I first heard brat, I was like, I don't like that. I don't like that term. But then I realized like it was like a capital B. It was like a thing. And you see this all the time on the lower end of the scale. And that's like a brat is someone who like there's a vampire king, there's a fae prince, there's a captain of the guard, there's this very powerful man that everybody's afraid of. And you have the female character who's always rolling her eyes. Yeah, you're really tough. Okay, that sort of thing. That is a brat and a brat tamer, because eventually they're going to have sex. She's going to submit to him and she's going to hate herself for it. But she'll be like, oh, he's going to be impossible to live with after this. But I can't say anything because it was really good. That's brat tamer. You'll see that all the time. And you can use that dynamic, especially I think enemies to lovers, that works really well. And then kink. There's lots of different kinds of kink, and you can use it at any strength that you want. And there's in the handout, there's a list of, there's a link. So there's a list of all the different kinds of kink. Well, not all of them, but there's a list of it. And you look through it, and sometimes you'll look through it, probably most of it, you'll be like, no, I don't think so. And there's weird stuff, like, I shouldn't say that, because it's okay to like what you like. But there's one that was like being aroused by having bugs crawl on you. And I was like, no. So almost anything that's a phobia is also a philia. And you might look at that list and you might find something weird and obscure, and you'd be like, what if she was a little into that? Kink praise. Kink praise is very big right now. In fact, I think there's like an Instagram reel, and it's about somebody's in their car, and there's like the male narrator, and he's like, be a good girl for me and turn left. And she's like, turn left. It's just like one of those things that has that like kink praise in it. And dirty talk. Dirty talk's also very big. If you struggle with dialogue, you might not want to take this on, because that can make things weird fast if it's not done right. But if you can also analyze this, right? You can take text that you like and see how they do it. Normally, dirty talk falls into several categories. It's usually like got some profanity in it. It's usually kind of like mean, like you look good with my dick in your mouth. You're just like, oh. But that's like the kind of thing, that kind of stuff. And it's usually to the point. I want you on your knees. Are you wet for me? Those kinds of like very direct things that would embarrass most people. That's kind of like, there's your starting point. And then, so I put this quote in here for a reason. It's not just interesting. This is from the spiciest romance book that I read last year. It's Harley LaRue's Her Soul to Take. This is between a human woman and a demon. And this is from her point of view. Just as I suspected, the belt lashed down again. I shrieked, my bare toes curling, and I found myself clinging to the leg of his jeans just to hold on to something. Those tears I'd been holding back escaped, but they weren't miserable. They were cathartic. It felt good to cry. It felt good to endure the pain. It tempered the guilt inside me and stoked the roaring inferno of my desire. The belt stroked slowly over me again, tingling across my stinging skin. The reason I want to put this on here because I wanted to remind everybody that the farther you go out on the kink scale, on the intensity scale, the more interiority you need. Because if it just stops, like I found myself clinging to the leg of his jeans just to hold on to something, and you don't get to like it's cathartic and I have a raging inferno of desire, you're leaving the reader to interpret that action themselves. And if you don't like to get hit with a belt, you are not going to like this character. You're not going to be rooting for them to come together. You're going to be like, he's really mean. And he is mean, but she's into mean, and so that works. And you can do almost anything. I just read a series, I think called Psycho Beasts, or maybe that's one of the words, one of the titles in it. It gets progressively more violent. And towards the end, like one of the lovers is like stabbing the other, which ordinarily he'd be like, that's not cool. They have supernatural healing. So there's that. But because the other character didn't care, they're like, yeah, stab me again. Then when, as a reader, for one thing, you've been like desensitized to it. You're like, okay. You're like, I wouldn't want to be stabbed, but all right. So you can write almost anything as long as you have the interiority and reactions to back up what your characters are feeling. Because that's all you really want. You want two characters to like what's going on. Because any book you read, there's always stuff going on you're not going to like. You're like, I don't like that. I don't like tangling tongues. Like, ew. Dueling tongues? Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, I don't like that. But I don't like hate a book because that's in there, which is a good thing. So anything you don't like, you don't have to put in there. But don't worry. If you're trying to like police your work so that you don't offend anybody, it will be boring. And then, how am I doing on time? Like we started late, and so now I'm like, am I way over? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So now we're going to talk about revision. So once you've written everything, the first thing you're going to want to look at, I think, is the pacing. So if you look at your page and you see there's big, huge blocks, your paragraphs are huge blocks, that means it's going to read slow. If there's a lot of dialogue reads extremely fast. And you want to make sure that you have a good balance of white space in there. And then you're going to want to look and see like, okay, am I lingering too long in a moment that feels boring? Like the taking the shirt off, right? Maybe you're like, it felt good when I wrote it, but now I think, one paragraph is enough. And decide where you're going to linger. That's the other thing. You want to make sure you're not just like skating over everything and nothing catches your attention. You're going to search for cliches. I'm of the belief that there's going to be cliches in there, and that's okay. Because sometimes it's like trying to remove the word was or the to be verb. Sometimes you have to make this sentence real weird in order to do it. And it's better just to put it in there. It's not really, most readers will just read past it. They don't think anything of it. And if you have 3 lines, 2 lines, even 1 line of a really interesting sentence, the cliches, they're not going to remember those at all. But get rid of the ones you can. And then look at your head, heart, and gut moments and make sure they're all there and you like the amounts they're in. If you're feeling like, or if you get feedback that like, I don't really care about these characters, you're going to want to add heart moments. If you're just like, all they're doing is thinking, you're going to want to cut back on your head moments, right? If you're just like, all they do is like run around, you're like, okay, maybe there were too many gut moments. So just take a look, and with those sort of filters in mind, ensure there's more than spice. Like scenes that are just sex are, I mean, you can write whatever you want, but it's really, really nice to have moments of humor, moments of tenderness, moments of connection within it. It gives you a bigger, more fuller experience. And then you want to find a non-judgmental beta reader. So again, unless your mom's super cool and open, don't give her your sex scene. You know, find somebody who reads at your spice level or above and say, you know, what do you think? It's got to be somebody that you trust, and then you'll find out what you need. In the handout, there's going to be the touch list, the 12 stages of intimacy link. I got some exercises because I didn't have enough time at all for this to practice on figurative language. I think unique sexual things. There's, I think, 5. There's a fetish link list, and there's some book recommendations of books I like that have spicy stuff in them. And I think you're putting it in there.
Emailed it to all the
Oh, excellent. Excellent. And then thank you. This is how you get a hold of me. Are there any questions? Are there any online? So after you write a hot scene, how do you keep it hot through the rest of the book? And you can do that through little ways. For example, if you have a character who's got a weird, one of your unique things is she discovers like she's sensitive behind her knees, right? That's kind of different. So maybe when they're at a restaurant, he just runs his thumb under the back of her knee, right? That will keep the spice going. Or even the back of his own knee with eye contact. You can do a lot with eye contact. You can do a lot with subtext and dialogue. You can still have all of the gut moments, the fluttering stomach, the hyper awareness, that sort of thing. You just want to see that in your other scenes, because that's actually a good question, because you don't want to just like drop the sex scene and then there's no attraction arousal moments until the next one. That would be weird. But it's not that hard to have those a little bit of gut moment in the scenes that follow. Any of you in the room have a question? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Yay. And thank you for being online. And thank you for anyone listening to the recording. My contact information is on there. If you have any questions or want to talk about anything, please feel free to reach out.